Today, I'm going to tell you how to set up an African cichlid tank. Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Zenzo from Tazawa Tanks. Now, I kind of got my start on YouTube making videos about African cichlids. I don't even know how many videos I made about African cichlids. I've talked about feeding them, behavior, breeding, tank size, all kinds of different types of videos about African cichlids. I have made them. And I still get questions all the time. Even people that will watch entire playlists and things like that, they'll still ask me how to set up an aquarium. They'll ask me questions about the decor and all kinds of stuff. Now, I've made videos about this in different little bits, but I thought what I would do is just kind of make one video all together with my thoughts on how to set up an African cichlid tank. And hopefully this will help a lot of you. And then for those of you that reach out to me in the future, I can just send you a link of this video and hopefully your questions will be asked. Now let's just imagine that you've already decided that you want to have African cichlids. So you've seen lots of different fish and you have looked at different aquariums and other people's fish tanks and other videos, and you've decided that African cichlids is for you. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to kind of assess the situation, meaning your situation. Now, when I talk about assessing your situation, what I'm talking about is taking a look at yourself, where you live, your resources, to decide kind of your starting point. What's your budget? How much money can you afford on a tank? How much money can you afford on fish, on feeding fish, on buying fish? How much space do you have? Do you have only enough room for maybe a 40 breeder or a 55-gallon aquarium? Or do you have space for a 125 or a 180 or something large like that? So the first very important thing to do is kind of assess the situation to determine what you have available as far as your resources and what space you have. Once you've done that assessment and you kind of have an idea about what you can afford and everything, you then need to figure out, what you're going to set up. So you need to do your research, which is probably what you're doing right now. So let's say that you've decided that you have enough space for a 75-gallon aquarium and you can afford everything, the filtration and the fish and everything like that. So then you need to start doing your research. You need to determine the 75-gallon aquarium that you have, what would be ideal in that tank based on your ability to take care of those fish. So I've made videos about African cichlid tank sizes. I'll put some links up above so you can click on those or watch those later on. That might be helpful. I've also made a complete Malawi cichlid care guide, essentially, on how to care for African cichlids. So I will put a link of that above as well. And I'll also put those links down below in the description probably. So anyway, so that will kind of give you an idea. Do you want to do Mbuna? Do you want to do peacocks? Do you want to do haps? Do you want to do dwarf cichlids? That is all that research that you're going to have to do in the beginning once you've kind of figured out your budget, how much space you can have, then figure out what fish can go in that tank size that you can afford. Okay, so now that you got all that boring stuff out of the way, that's not boring, I enjoy it, but for some people it might be boring. Now that you got all that research stuff out of the way, now it's time to go out and buy your tank. So the first thing that you want to do is you prepare your area where that tank is going to go. You want to make sure that you have the ability to get that tank home, that you have friends or family members or somebody to help you carry that tank if you have to go upstairs or downstairs or through doorways. So get all that kind of situated and figure out, and then go out and buy your aquarium. Now, I would always advise to get the largest aquarium that you can afford, especially for African cichlids, because you're going to be happier down the road. So maybe you can afford a 75. Don't get the 55 if you can afford a 75 and if you have the space for it, because you will be much happier down the road, your fish will be happier, etc. Now, once you get your tank home, you're going to want to set it up. Now, this is very important, and this is the part where you really have to show some patience. You don't want to rush into this area. You don't want to hurry up and get fish and put them in there, because you could have a lot of problems. If you're not familiar with the nitrogen cycle, you should do some research on the nitrogen cycle and make sure that you understand how to cycle your aquarium. Basically, what you want to do is you want to ensure that the aquarium that you set up is ready for fish. A fish store might say wait 24 hours and you can put fish in there. They are wrong. 99% of the time. There might be some instances where you can do that if you have cycled media from another aquarium, which a lot of us more experienced fish keepers will do, or if you got loaded with live aquarium plants. You know, there are some cases where you could add some fish in there, but really you want to be patient. Don't add fish right away. This is a time that you want to set everything up and kind of figure out your operation. So set up your tank, do all the decor, figure out your filtration, get a test kit or some type of way of testing the water, testing for temperature, testing for nitrate, nitrite, ammonia, etc., pH. So you'll want to kind of experiment during this phase. So you set the aquarium up, you've kind of figured it out, you've you know, got some decor and you've kind of set it up the way you think that you want it, or the pictures that you've seen, you've kind of emulated that, or videos. This is that time, and really be patient during this period. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to cycle an aquarium. There's lots of videos out there on how to cycle an aquarium, or papers online. So do your research and make sure that you really take the time to go through this process, because you can have some fish deaths. And African cichlids are big waste producers, so you don't want to have a situation where you set up, you know, this expensive tank and then you put fish in a few days later and they all die. So make sure that you really go through this process. Now, something that I like to do and a lot of other people like to do during this same phase is, as you're setting up that main tank, your main display tank that you're so happy about, at that same time, think about a quarantine or hospital tank. Now, if you're not familiar with a quarantine tank, essentially it's just a separate tank. Usually it's a lot smaller of an aquarium that you can use to quarantine fish when you first get them from the pet store, from the shipper or whatever, to ensure that they don't have diseases and bacterial infections and stuff like that that could be transferred to other fish in your established aquarium. Or, especially with African cichlids, because they can be aggressive and beat each other up, if you do have a situation, you have a tank where you can take that beat up fish and put it in that hospital tank and let it heal for a few weeks before you reintroduce it back. So while you're setting up your main tank, do some research and think about setting up a quarantine tank. Now, a quarantine tank doesn't have to be elaborate like your main tank. It could be something very simple, like a small 10 or 20 gallon aquarium, or even like a big Rubbermaid or some plastic tote that you can get at like Target or Home Depot or something. I've done this before. I've made videos about this before. And you can just throw in an inexpensive sponge filter and a little air pump, and basically for like $30 you can set up a quarantine tank that you can use. You can break it down, etc. So that would be my recommendation, is to have a quarantine tank that you have set up at that same time as your original tank, because that's going to come into play as we get fish. Now we're getting into the real fun part. You have set up your tank, you've done all your research, you've set up your quarantine tank, you have a test kit, you've tested your water, everything's good. It's been through the nitrogen cycle, it's been like a month now, you're ready to get fish. Now, there are lots of ways of getting fish. You can buy fish online. I've made videos about that before. You can get them at the local fish store, you can get them at fish clubs, you can get them from friends. Lots and lots of places to get African cichlids. Whatever way that you decide to get them, my recommendation is to try to get them at a juvenile size, usually around 2 to 3 inches. The reason why is when they're juveniles of that size, about 2 to 3 inches, the males will start to show color, so you'll know which ones are males and which ones are females. This is important because in some cases, you might want an all-male tank to reduce aggression, or maybe you want to try to breed something, so you want more females than males. So you want to get them when they are about that size. Another reason why you want to get them about that big is they don't damage each other as much. If you have a bunch of juvenile fish that you introduce into an aquarium, chances are that they're not really mature enough to really try to establish dominance, significantly at least, and to start to beat up and hurt some of the other fish. So when you get them that small and get them together, usually you're kind of starting off at a good spot where you're not going to have like a bunch of chaos and a thunderdome in your aquarium right away. Now, when you get your fish, my recommendation is to always get about 4 or 5, maybe as little as 3, but 4 or 5 at a time. And you want to put those 4 or 5 in the aquarium at the same time. I've made videos about this before as well, and that's like a reoccurring thing that I keep saying. I've made videos about this. But you want to learn how to add fish in. I've made a video about that. But basically what you want to do is you want to add those 4 or 5 fish in together at the same time, so that one fish hasn't had a chance to establish its territory. You basically are putting them all in together so they can kind of all figure things out together and not, again, avoiding that aggression issue. You'll notice that a lot of this stuff is really about avoiding aggression, mitigating, damages that your fish could have. So get about 4 or 5 at a time, put them in the aquarium. Again, it's been cycled already. and observe them for about a week or two. Make sure that things are looking good, that you don't have any diseases popping up, etc. At that same time that you're getting those 4 or 5 fish, I would buy another 4 or 5 fish. So actually I would buy 8 fish, let's say, or 10 fish. Let's just say 8 fish. I would put 4 in the aquarium that I set up. I would then take the other 4 and put them in the quarantine tank. That's also been cycled because it's been set up at the same time. Observe that main tank for a few days, a week or 2 weeks. And then that will also give the bacteria in your main aquarium kind of a chance to catch up and deal with the waste that the fish are producing. After a few days, take those other 4 or 5 fish and put those in the aquarium. So now you've got 8 to 10 fish in that aquarium. Depending on the size, that might be it. Or you might want to have more in there because of the whole overstocking thing. At that time, you'd want to, again, procure, go out, buy some more, get some more African cichlids, another 4 or 5, put those in the quarantine tank. So now you have your 4 or 5 in the main tank initially, and then you've added your other 4 or 5 after a couple of weeks. So now you've got 8 to 10 in there, and they're doing their thing. While, as soon as you put those other 4 or 5 in there, you have a whole nother batch of 4 or 5 in that quarantine tank that are ready to go through the quarantine process. So you can medicate them if you need to, treat them for ick, treat them for internal parasites, bacterial infections, etc. Observe them. Maybe you're using salt. And then you can make sure that those fish that you just got are going through that process so that when you put them in the tank with those other 8 to 10, that they're not going to give diseases to those. So that's kind of the idea that I've always shared as far as adding fish. When people have asked me, when customers have asked me about adding African cichlids to an aquarium, I always tell them to do it this way. Add 4 or 5 at a time, space it out every week or 2, and also set up that QT / hospital tank at the same time. So now that you've kind of gone through all this process, you have your aquarium set up, you've got all the fish in there, those 4 or 5 that you put in at the end, again, wait another week or 2, and then after they've gone through their quarantine period, you might want to wait a little bit longer depending on how you're quarantining them. So if you're using medications, maybe you can add them into your tank in 7 to 10 days. But if you're just observing them, you might need to wait 3 or 4 weeks, etc. Anyway, once that's done, put those in the aquarium, and now you've got your 12 to 15 African cichlids in that aquarium. That's probably tops of where you are right now and as much as you want to add. Or maybe you have a 180 and you want to keep going. So just repeat that process, quarantine, observe, add 4 or 5 at a time, etc. And then again, watch my video on how to add African cichlids to your aquarium. Now, once all that's done, we're not exactly done with the process. We want to just check a few more things. So once all that's done and you've added your fish, then you can break down your quarantine aquarium so that you don't have it set up all the time. You can stick it underneath your existing fish tank if there's space for it, or stick it in the garage or something, or put it in a closet, empty of course. That sponge filter that you were using, I would advise to use that in the main aquarium because it does have beneficial bacteria that you want to keep going all the time. Or maybe you can squeeze up that sponge and stick it inside a hang on the back filter, or stick it inside a canister filter, just so that in the event that you do have a problem, you can quickly get that sponge filter and set that tank right back up, and you don't have to wait for any cycling process. So once you've broken that down, then what you want to do is you want to observe your fish and just look for watch their behaviors. With African cichlids, by this time it's probably been a month or 2, they will start to establish dominance. They'll be getting bigger because you're feeding them, and you'll just want to, again, just observe and make sure that you don't have any problems with your fish. And then at this point, what I would recommend, once you've been observing them and you've broken down your QT tank, your hospital tank, is I would recommend kind of creating a schedule or a system, just getting into a flow where you are regularly checking the water parameters. So if you're watching this video, you're probably new to keeping fish, or maybe you're new to keeping African cichlids, and African cichlids sometimes can create different water conditions in other fish because they eat so much and they poop so much, etc. So you'd want to get into the habit of testing your water on a regular basis. You want to get into making sure that as you're doing your water tests that you're doing the appropriate water changes. Based on what I just shared with adding 15 fish, you're probably doing weekly water changes of at least 50% or so. So you'll want to really get into the groove and have a system, have a schedule, and really kind of fine tune that, really, understand really what it takes to care for those fish, how much to feed them exactly. And a lot of this is going to be learned, and a lot of it you'll end up learning from testing your water, etc. So really try to get into that groove and make it kind of a habit of a system that you've set up. And that's it. It's pretty easy. It's not that difficult to set up an African cichlid tank any more than any other aquarium. The most important parts that I would say after doing all of your research and figuring out your budget and everything is to make sure that you are patient and letting that tank cycle, that you are very observant as far as the fish that you're getting, so that you're making sure that you have healthy fish and you're putting healthy fish in the aquarium, that whole hospitalization part, that QT tank. But then you are watching for aggression. The main difference with African cichlids versus most other aquarium fish is that they can be very aggressive and you can have some problems. So really, you want to manage that part, and that's why I suggest adding 4 or 5 at a time, really watching that and having that hospital tank available to set up if you start to notice a fish getting beat up, hanging out in the corner, raggedy fins, not eating, losing weight, etc. You want to rescue that fish, because we don't want to have hurt or sick fish in our aquarium. We don't want the fish to die in there, and it might be where you would have to rehome that fish, or once you nurse it back to health, or maybe set up another tank. So anyway, I hope that this kind of lengthy video was helpful for you in setting up your African cichlid aquarium. Hopefully this answers a lot of your questions, so that in the future when I get the emails and the DMs and all that kind of stuff, I'm just going to direct you to watch this video. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you originally came to my channel because of African cichlids, my logo for my channel is an African cichlid, if you don't know. So if you originally came here to my channel because of African cichlids, then please comment down below. One of my favorite things that I love to read, wherever I read it, again, Instagram, YouTube comments, emails, whatever it is, I love to read when someone shares with me that I have inspired them to keep a particular fish. Oftentimes it's African cichlids, but sometimes it's other fish like mudskippers and stuff. But I love to read those comments. So if that has happened to you, if I have inspired you to keep these fish, please comment down below. That's all I had for now. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends. That's all I have for now. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.